Welcome to the Compliance Experts podcast, hosted by VARTAN Consultancy. Miles Vartan and his guests, as experts in compliance and risk management, will guide you carefully and with clarity through the many sectors of compliance like health and safety, ISO and operator licenses, and the complexity of customs regulations. They'll also be talking about the latest legislation, global trade news, and the hot topics as they happen.
Good morning. Welcome to Series 2 of the VARTAN Consultancy podcast, Episode 1, an introduction to the Sizewell C project. And with me today is Ashley Shorey-Mills, Sizewell C Supply Chain Engagement Director from the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce.
Morning, Miles. Yeah, and a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along, and delighted to be able to talk about Sizewell. We're getting quite used to talking about it now, so hopefully there'll be some useful nuggets of information.
Give us a quick introduction, a little background, Ashley, as to how you got involved in the project in the first place. How long have you worked for the Chamber now, Suffolk Chamber now?
Yeah, so I'm coming up to nearly 3.5 years now. It has absolutely flown by. I mean, you'll be aware, obviously, the Chamber have been involved now for 13 years in total. And yeah, about 3.5 years ago, I was brought in to take on the role of kind of head of the Sizewell C supply chain engagement and lead the team doing what we do, helping businesses locally who want to work on the project to get themselves ready. And importantly, working with Sizewell as well, so that they understand when they have packages of work coming up, who locally, regionally can fulfil those roles. So really working as that hand holder across everyone. It's a very exciting job. I wouldn't say I underestimated it, but I definitely did, because the vast array of skills and sectors and types of businesses you have to deal with and talk to, it's amazing.
And you live locally too.
Yes,
but, local is a word we'll refer to repeatedly during these podcasts. You live locally and you live quite close to Sizewell.
Yep.
How are your neighbours reacting to conversations? How are they reacting to when they hear news about Sizewell and how the project's progressing?
Yeah, I think easy one always for someone of my age is school playground. You know, I speak to a lot of other parents who will often ask me, you know, how's work going, what am I doing, because they now know what I'm doing. And honestly, for most of them, it's just, you know, crack on with it. They notice the work. I live quite close to Wickham Market, so of course we see a lot of the work happening there now. A lot of people I speak to work in the Leiston area, so they see literally firsthand what's happening. For so many people, it's just, you know, crack on. It's exciting. It's something that's going on. Most of them in this area, as you know, Miles, will have been related or know someone that worked at B, or the construction of B, and worked at A, or even the construction of A. So Sizewell's become something that's just this part of the world, and it's very relevant and very aware for everyone. So no, it's an exciting time, and I think the increasing amount of public activity that's now happening on the project, I think is really, everything's taking another step up now.
I know that you and I have spent some time on the golf course looking for golf balls. There was an example of what you just said. There was recently a big charity golf day, wasn't there?
There was, yeah. We were asked by Sizewell and their charity partner for the next 2 years, St Elizabeth Hospice, to organise a charity golf day on their behalf. We were given a short notice to do it because they wanted to try and get something in this side of the winter. But we were blown away by the response. I mean, we sold out the teams, every piece of sponsorship within a couple of days.
Amazing.
So we're already planning next year to go twice as big. My events team are not too happy with some of my ideas because I have the ideas and they have to put them into practice. But no, we raised over £9,600 in an incredibly short period of time. Really good day. Fantastic hosts at Finn Valley Golf Club as well, I have to say. And no, really, really good. And it was just a good opportunity, I think, for lots of businesses to give back to, importantly, a Suffolk-based charity.
Having played in quite a few of those, there is a maximum number of teams you can get on a golf course, though, so you're not standing there forever and ever and ever. So
correct. We managed to get 20 round in good time. That's good. And my plan next year is 2 golf courses, Miles. So I want 40 teams.
2 golf courses.
I want 40 teams next year.
Oh wow! How exciting would that be? Fantastic. I've never heard of that before. Brilliant. Your neighbours, as we've done this in the schoolyard, and have started to see yellow directional signs for Sizewell C.
Yes.
Please come this way and don't go that way. If they're driving up past towards Leiston, you've got 2 park and rides, one at Wickham Market and one at Darsham railway station, where there are lots of Harris fencing and neatly parked diggers and vans, and
Yes.
they're doing exploratory work, aren't they?
Yeah, correct. And actually, I think the Neatly Park thing, I think is a good example. If I take Glenham, between Glenham and Stratford, there's the little compound there, which is the start of the Two Village bypass that they've only literally just started the work on. But actually, if you've been driving past there the last few weeks, you'd have seen a number of vehicles, a very well organised compound. And I think what Sizewell will want to ensure they do is every piece of work that they do, it is treated like it's absolutely key that it's perfect. So you do see, all joking aside, everything is neatly parked, clean, ready to go, well organised. But yeah, of all of those off-sites, so Wickham Market, Darsham, Glenham, now the work has started to clear the land for the ecology and the archaeologists to get in. Same on some of the bits you can't see from the main road. So some of the road, for the link road, some of the archaeology has now started. So all of the off-site pieces of work, you're now getting the ologists involved to help make sure that land is ready before the earthworks and the actual construction of those sites can happen. So if you take the park and rides as an example, that as a process is going at ITT stage at the moment, very soon to be awarded, hopefully within the next few weeks, certainly this side of Christmas. We've then work to start through next year, dependent obviously how quickly the ecologists and archaeologists get on with things. And then the major roads, which is the Two Village bypass to miss out Farnham and Stratford St Andrew, and the new link road to go from, in essence, between Saxmundham and Yoxford on the A12 direct to site. That will also be awarded this side of Christmas, with again work to start probably spring next year. So really now the activity off-site has ramped up quite dramatically. And I think, again, that just breeds into that confidence this project is happening. People are now starting to see Sizewell popping up all around, which then kind of starts to show, well, hang on a minute, I recognise that business. Because actually when you do drive past, for example, Wickham Market, you see local firms there, which is the great thing. You're now starting to notice more and more local firms play little parts in all these different sites.
Which is a point I was just going to get to. So initially when the Harris fencing went up, you saw a name which some people will know. And we got familiar with them in Felixstowe because it was Volker Fitzpatrick. And Volker Fitzpatrick did the coastal defences here. They put down,
okay.
And so they put Harris fencing all the way along the prom, and the locals were going, what's going on here? This is our prom, not yours. And each sort of 20 yards there was a sign on the Harris fencing saying, take 2 minutes, and that was their health and safety thing.
Yeah.
So it was aimed at people working on site, but also people just coming to observe and walk along the prom. The idea being that if you were worried about anything, you should take 2 minutes to consider the situation. Mm-hmm. You might need to go and speak to your boss, but it might mean that you're just going to drive that forklift a little bit slower because of you don't want to fall off the prom with your forklift. So Volker Fitzpatrick, a big national name with a local presence, and as you've said, they will use and engage with local companies.
They will. We've got a great example this week because Monday of the week that we're filming this, we did a meet the buyer for Volker Fitzpatrick. You know, they approached us because they are a company. Okay, they've got a good regional base, and obviously they work a lot in Suffolk already, as you've said with Felix. So they do a lot of work at the US bases at Lakenheath and Milton Hall, for example, and obviously increasingly done a lot of work at Sizewell. And you'll find this, a lot of these larger organisations will win some of these major contracts from the client, but that shouldn't put off locals, because then all of the commitments that Sizewell made is what Volkers then pick up. So they reached out to us to say, look, we've got a lot of work on site at the moment, as you say, certain compounds for the park and rides and other things, as well as a lot of work on site itself. And they understand that they need to deliver the commitments of Sizewell themselves. So therefore, local supply chain, engaging in communities, developing skills and apprentices. So hence we brought together, I think we had 127 people turn up to that event, certain specific sectors that Volkers needed coming up, so that they can look at their existing supply chain that they would use around the rest of the UK and go, well, how do we make that more localised for Sizewell? And that was the purpose. And they had some wonderful conversations with some really small niche but very local businesses that hopefully now they will continue conversations. And the examples where we've already introduced in the past to Volkers is actually the likes of Volker Fitzpatrick and the others will then actually handhold those businesses. So the example you gave of health and safety, understanding that major projects have a different type of focus and a more intense focus on things like health and safety and consideration of the people that are working there. And Sizewell ramps it up that bit further. You know, if things take an hour normally on a site, they probably take 4 hours on Sizewell because of that consideration of everything that has to be done. So these larger tier one organisations, their role is not just to deliver this on time, on budget, it's also to handhold those local businesses that we introduce to them.
The Meet the Buyers are fantastic events. You and I worked with Peterson in Lowestoft, and they had on the logistics tender, and you get people drive huge distances and go up very early in the morning to show amazing commitment to get to these events. That's when they're publicised. And I think the conversation we've had so far is something very repeatable that we've had with an awful lot of suppliers. But often the question is, well, how do I know who the tier ones are?
Yeah.
Rather than just waiting for them to announce they've got to have a Meet the Buyer,
Yeah.
I want to get to know them now.
Yeah.
How can small and medium-sized businesses, or in Suffolk, quite large businesses, get to find out who the tier ones are?
So I think there is an element, most of the answer to that is going to be about us, but firstly, there is an element of that proactive nature as businesses. You know, as Suffolk businesses, we see it particularly, and more broadly, actually, regional business in the East. We live our own little microcosm in Anglia, don't we? That everything's all right, everything's okay, and you get great recommendations word of mouth. Actually, projects like this, you have to be out and sell yourself a bit more and go out and find those businesses. So it is a little bit of, you've got to be proactive. But that's actually particularly, main answer to this, Miles, is that's where we come in. Both through our comms and through our portal that we manage, we will make sure that people are aware who's winning these contracts. So again, this week, we have literally last night, Miles, you may not have even seen it yourself, loaded on the latest contract award data onto Compete For. So Compete For, that platform that Sizewell use to publish all opportunities, is where we put the procurement timeline for the next 6 to 12 months. So what is Sizewell going to look to procure? That's now on there. But also, what have they procured? So you will now see, for example, we can be public, Brahini, good proper Suffolk business, have won their first contract on site for the public rights of way. So that is now on there. So people can now start to see who's winning stuff. At that point, you can reach out and reach out to us, reach out direct to those businesses. But actually, our work is very quietly in the background, working with those businesses who are either looking to win work, have won work before it's publicised, to help them understand if they're going to use a local supply chain, who do they need? And that's, again, where we stress to everyone, get signed up, be involved in the portal, come to our events, because then that helps us represent you in the best way when these companies come forward. So, let's use a silly example. VARTAN Consultancy, win a contract. You might not be publicly able to talk about it yet, but you would be talking to us to say, look, as part of the delivery of this, actually, we need some training providers to support us in delivering this scope of works. You would come to us, we would identify those training providers and create those introductions. That's the way in which this works to help give local and regional businesses that extra chance to work on the project.
So we did a series of films with where you and I introduced it by walking up and down the waterfront on an incredibly hot day in Ipswich called Super Suffolk Suppliers. I know some of those people we interviewed, this would be news to them. So I think that possibly we all need to publicise how you find this information. I think when you go on Compete For, and I'm pretty certain the Chamber will have done this is how you work with Compete For.
Yeah.
But when you go on Compete For, it's a little bit of a institutionalised written website where it's not particularly clear where to find this information. Do you know when you log on there which button to push to get the list of awards? Or
the good thing is, you're right. Obviously, Compete For actually is a history, was a platform developed for the Olympics.
It was, yeah.
And by signing up to Compete For the opportunities there, automatically sign up for everything else that's on there. There's Heathrow, there's HS2, there's loads of large-scale infrastructure projects. What we try to do with the Sizewell one, and we're working with the developers of Compete For to improve its softness, to improve its pliability, if you like, of how you use it. But actually, when you go to competefor.com/SizewellC, it's on the front page. So we've tried to make it as easy and as simple as possible for you as a business. If you want to find the opportunities and that timeline, it's on that front page for you. So there's not too much searching to have to do. But again, the advantage you've got as a business that's based in the East is if you struggle, you just pick up the phone. You just drop me an email, Ian, Karim, whoever in the team, and just say, give us a heads up, what's happening with this package of works or that thing that I saw recently. Because that's what we're there to do.
Brilliant. You referred to earlier in our conversation about something called an ITT.
Yes.
which follows on from a PQQ, which follows on from an EOI. Tell those listening how the various key points in the process, the procurement process, work.
Yeah, and apologies to anyone who's not yet working on Sizewell. You'll soon realise that it becomes acronym heaven. But so the procurement process, I think the biggest lesson that small and local businesses can learn is that these things take time. Standard procurement on Sizewell takes around 9 months from start to finish. So it really does take a huge amount of time, energy and effort. But if you park our job, which is done pre-procurement, all that stuff around getting businesses ready, helping them to be in the right place, and then helping the project understand who's locally and what we can do and what we can't do. The first step is on Compete For. So that's Compete For, so that's for.com/Sizewell C. That's where the expression of interest. So that first step. So there will be a package of works that will go on there that will say, we wish to do X. So most recently there was one around fire safety. There's been soon going to be one around rock armour, for example, to help the flood prevention and to protect against the storms we get. This is an opportunity for a business to simply put their hand up. Simple process, only a few questions that if it's relevant to you, that package, you're sticking your hand up, putting your hat in the ring and saying, I'm interested in maybe having a bigger conversation. And that's what it is. The next step will then be the PQQ, so the pre-qualification questionnaire. So after you've expressed your interest, a few weeks later, the project will look at that list of businesses and go, right, who on there reasonably could deliver this piece of work? And we'll then take that information away and we'll contact those businesses and say, right, we're going to take you forward to the next stage. That next stage will be on a separate platform called iValuer. It's something that the Sizewell project will send you all the links to get registered on. And everything around pre-qualification will then be handled on a separate platform. And at this point, they'll really deep dive into your business. Understand everything about what you do as a business. Basically seeing, are you fit and right to be able to deliver this piece of work? That process will normally be for 6 weeks or so, maybe a little longer, a little less, depending on the package of works and the sizes and scope of works. But should you then be successful at that point, the list will then be defined and cut down even smaller, normally maybe 3, 4, 6 suppliers, that will then go to that ITT stage, the invitation to tender. At that point is where you start to get the full scope of works of what's going to be expected. So until that point, it's really been about, are you fit as a business to be able to do this? Then once you get to the ITT stage, it's, can you actually do specifically what we need? And that's where you'll then put your bid in. That will again be through iValuer, so that same system done directly with the Sizewell project and give you that opportunity to really showcase a compliant bid to what they want, or potentially also submit a non-compliant bid. Maybe you've got a different way that you would see something being done. Now, what's important through each of the PQQ and ITT process is that you have that direct engagement then with the project. You submit questions, you submit clarifications, and we encourage businesses to do this. The whole purpose of that part of the project is to have that conversation so that you can identify if it's right for you. Also, if you've got ways of potentially doing it, if it's something Sizewell can listen to, because not always can they listen to ideas. Sometimes it has to be done a specific way for certain reasons. And then should you be successful in the bid, it may go to a best and final offer between 2 bidders. There will be contract negotiations, and then ultimately you'll register onto a different platform to manage that contract should you be successful. Like I said, that whole process can take up to about 9 months. That will flex. Some take a bit longer, some will be quicker, but generally speaking around that sort of timeline. And you'll notice that if you look on Compete For at that timeline, procurement timeline that we've just published, you'll see that often if something is going to PQQ in, let's say Q2 of this year, that the contract award is Q4 of this year, Q1 of next year. That gives you a kind of idea for the timelines involved.
The timeline, I think, is something that people should print on A3 and stick on the wall so you know the targets.
But actually, on that point, I think it's important to say, Miles, because you've very kindly dedicated some of your time to them before, we do our webinars, our business support program webinars. Yeah. And one of them, we did 3 recently, 2 on Compete For, 1 on bid writing and tendering. They're all done in September. Obviously, we host all of our webinars are recorded and hosted on our website on both Sizewell C supplychain.co.uk and also competefor.com. So you can see them on either platform. But please go back and look over them because we talk specifically about exactly that, the timelines involved, how things work, how Compete For works. The whole idea of all of those webinars is that there's something you can go back on. So if you're a business that's now successfully winning a contract and you need to understand a bit more about health and safety, they can go back to our one we did, 15 months ago, 16 months ago, I think now, and they can listen and watch the webinar we did with yourselves and I think Burkitt's and some other people to help them understand some of the things they should be considering
absolutely.
When they're on this project.
No, absolutely. Rather disturbing thing with watching these back is that your appearance changes over the years. So having just a tip for those who have to log on to iValuer, the helpline number is very helpful. So if you get stuck, ring the helpline. It's actually an American number and you end up speaking to somebody who's French. So it's but he was particularly helpful. And there's a bit where it will say that your registration is not complete because you have to go to a page where you have to select who is the salesperson and who is another person. I think that, but certainly it's mandatory to select yourself as the salesperson, even though you may be the managing director or the IT person, but you have to select yourself as a salesperson.
And it's so important. I mean, we're going to plan to do a big piece of work in the new year. Now we're starting to see some contracts being awarded, is actually do some of our series of webinars on experience. Experience of businesses that are going through that procurement process, but more importantly, maybe those that have been successful going through it and the lessons they've learned around onboarding and getting people on site and then how to behave on site, etc. Because I think the more we can share that, the better. But equally, as I say, the Sizewell procurement team that you'll be working with through that PQQ, ITT, so the pre-qualification and the tender process, they're there to support you. Ultimately, they've decided to take you to that stage, so they want to handhold you through that process as well.
Good. I think there are certain questions in the expression of interest that are a bit quizzical, so it will, and you're worried where it will ask you, have you got experience of working at Hinckley? Please don't worry about just saying no. If don't ever create any fictional answers. That isn't going to preclude you from taking you forward to the next step. It's highly unlikely to. So we talked earlier in our chat about how people can see what's going on. We've talked about signs, the park and rides. There's something called the ACA being built at the moment, which I'm reliably I'm reliably informed means the ancillary construction area.
Yes.
Office accommodation and sidings for the green rail route. Is that because everything has to be green? Or?
Yeah, well, as much as possible, to be fair. And that's one of them public things that I think people will see the most noticeable. You know, if you're driving out of Leiston towards the site, as you've kind of left Leiston, if you like, and gone past Eastlands Industrial Estate, you'll see on your left-hand side what we always describe, Miles, when we used to do these presentations on that map as the small little bit of land next to Leiston. Actually, now when you see it, it is huge. And that is it. There's an office complex there for about 300 desks. And the whole purpose is to get those working on the project, both Sizewell, but also some of its lead contractors operating in that same office space. I worked in there myself a couple of weeks ago. It's a beautiful place to work, I have to say. Very productive. You've got all aspects of the project in one place. It's also where all the onboarding and training and vetting will take place on the bottom floor. So if you're a business that is successful and a dozen of your staff have got to go through the induction training, that's the building they will use. So they feel like that's the public face that people are going to see. Behind it, there's an awful lot of clearance going on, an increasing number of UXO related stuff, so dealing with unexploded ordnance that's happened across the site. They found out there was a lot of World War II training on the actual main site itself, so there's huge amounts of work going in this area, lots of fencing. But the aim of that, the rest of the ACA site is for laydown and storage of materials, tunnel segments, things like that, because it's a perfect place for those items being brought in via rail. And rail's another one of those exciting things. I mean, not much work will have been seen, but actually if you live anywhere near the Suffolk line, kind of between Ipswich and Woodbridge, at night you'd have seen increasing numbers of work over the last 3 to 6 months. That's been Network Rail performing signal upgrades for Sizewell. The rail work in essence starts in February, March next year, and will take about 12 months to upgrade the Saxmundham to Leiston line, because by February, March 2026, they want 2 trains a night. At the same time that's happening, they'll be building the entirely new rail route, which will go from that line direct to site, cut across Lovers Lane, for example, so there's level crossings to put in. And that is planned to be up and running by kind of April, May 2026. So by that point, you'll have 4 trains a night.
So I suppose the elephant in the room is that we've had a change of government and a recent press release from Sizewell C from one of the joint managing directors was, this is now a government-backed project.
Yes.
When do we expect the government to actually talk specifically about Sizewell C?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the good thing that we've seen, both through the election period, but also since then, is they've been very clear Sizewell was on their roadmap. It's happening. It's part of their answer. One of the ministers for energy in Desnes was on site recently, Lord Hunt. And I think what's important is there needs to be confidence in this project. And everything we're seeing as a Chamber of Commerce from our step back route on this is that there is that confidence, there is that belief this will happen. The government has already put in many billions. It's obviously committed to backing another 5.5 billion since Labour have come in. The next big point is FID, reaching that final investment decision, which we anticipate will be some point soon. We don't know when, obviously. We're certainly not in that loop. But every bit of confidence we get from Sizewell is that FID will happen and that this project is going at pace. There is large targets per month to spend. They are having to spend a lot of money to get this project in the right place, to make it both investable, but also to keep it on track, on time, on budget. And again, like we said earlier, actually, you see the amount of activity happening off-site as well as on-site that you can't necessarily see. It's huge. I mean, so this project is happening.
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is get on the train from Ipswich to Felixstowe, and after you've gone through Derby Road, you run down the back of the Orwell Logistics Park.
Yeah.
And every day, the latest build on there, which I think is going to be 500,000 square foot warehouse, in addition to the pretty much 700,000 which is already built.
Yeah.
The 500,000 one is almost like a Lego kit, isn't it? It's just going at speed down the.
And I think this is an important point, because a lot of people talk to us about wanting to work with Sizewell, and we get it. Of course, everyone wants to work on the Sizewell project, but I've been saying for a long time since I've been involved, the indirect roll-off of what's going to happen because of Sizewell. Because don't forget, Orwell Logistics Park, Sizewell have agreed to become a tenant. They're not building it. The build is nothing to do with them. They're just being a tenant. So the fact that you've got Sizewell being a tenant, as then whoever it is who's building Orwell Logistics, has given them the confidence to just crack on and build to spec. We had exactly the same. This week we did the Meet the Buyer webinar with Pontins at Pakefield. So again, Sizewell are agreeing to be a tenant at Pontins Pakefield for the next 5 years. They're not paying for the build of this. So Britannia Hotels are investing, as was said on that, maybe up to £5 million currently is the planned potential budget for this project. They're investing £5 million to upgrade Pakefield as a result of Sizewell. So we say this an awful lot to businesses. Yes, there is opportunity on Sizewell, but there is opportunities because of Sizewell as well. You look at the investment ABP are putting in at Lowestoft, and then hopefully in the future in Ipswich. You look at the opportunity of what's happening around Freeport East and other sites, that actually because of Sizewell, there will be multiple other opportunities for business to get involved in. And so Orwell's a great one. Once it's built and Sizewell are tenanting, you're going to need businesses to help run it, maintain it, clean it, keep it going, look after it, repaint it, fill potholes. All of these things are going to be needed. We even had one example recently, a business approach said, who's going to be in charge of clearing the gutters? But it is, all of these things are needed. And there's big gutters on that place, isn't there, Mark? So, it's all these things, and it's that massive opportunity, yes, direct on the project, but also indirectly as a result.
And when you go on the Sizewell C website, sizewellc.com, I think, website, there's 2,500 Suffolk construction jobs will be created, 4 billion into the regional economy, 9 million tonnes of CO2 avoided every year of operation of the site. So it's something which is very relevant to jobs, to the environment, to the social well-being of the area. In terms of, you hear that the people talk about local a lot, local community benefit, and we're now starting to see that being delivered. There was a press release recently, I think maybe even an interview from one of the joint managing directors about committing to creating 500 jobs.
Oh, in Ipswich,
in Ipswich, locally, with the local MP. The Lonely Planet Guide has highlighted recently how well the area is looking after local attractions, and obviously there's the Sizewell C Limited will be very mindful of not impacting negatively on the Gold Coast, as you often hear it being called. And you've got the community funds that is looking to invest in
it's
economic,
how you
social,
build
environmental
this.
well-being.
No, it is. It's how you build this, but do as much good, because you are going to, I mean, damage is probably the wrong word, but you are going to cause upset to what is the de facto way East Suffolk has been for the last however many years, because probably since Sizewell B was built, because you're suddenly going to have this massive project happening. And don't get me wrong, let's bear in mind there's lots of other projects happening as well. So it's how you mitigate against that. And I think, come the end of Sizewell C construction and all of that land, those 350 odd hectares of land have been remediated back to natural land as opposed to what they were in some examples, which are just pine forest. We will live in an even more beautiful place. We've just got to go through that pain to get there. I think what's important, what Sizewell want to do is, whilst they know the damage they're going to do in certain pockets, is how they spread the benefit wider. So you mentioned the community fund, Miles. Fantastic for charity sector, voluntary sector, social enterprise. They can tap into a fund if they can do some good in East Suffolk. We as East Suffolk residents, we know what the problems are here, whether it is deprivation, whether it is opportunities for young people, whatever it may be. We've got the charities and the people that understand what East Suffolk needs. Well, Sizewell have put a load of money aside, run by the Suffolk Community Foundation, to be able to help appease that. There's a tourism fund that's managed by East Suffolk Council for exactly that, because there will be some effect, almost certainly. It might be pockets. Different reports say there'll be a bigger or lesser effect on local tourism. But there's an opportunity, therefore, for us to spend money to attract people in different ways potentially than we're doing currently, and ways we wouldn't have historically been able to fund to attract people to East Suffolk. I think what's important, we know, Miles, you and I know particularly for our work with the Chamber, we live in a part of the world that has very low unemployment, and we do. But we also live in a part of the world that has, give or take, nearly 20% less average wage than the national average. So we do have low unemployment, but we have low employment, if that makes sense. So how do we create those opportunities to give people more aspirations? And projects like Sizewell and the others give that opportunity. It's how we then do that in different sectors that's vital, because if we all keep fishing in the same pond, we all end up going for the same people who just move from job to job to job to job, and that doesn't really help anyone, does it? Actually, it's how we tap into those parts of the community that have not traditionally had that opportunity on a project like this, or that where there is then displacement, that we're again creating that pipeline for those people who again maybe haven't had those opportunities to get into jobs where displacement has taken place. So it is about, let's create the opportunity and then let's backfill as much as we can.
Yeah, and we're talking about the displacement aspect is assisting firms or signposting firms, I suppose, in terms of skills development.
Yes.
You need to continue to develop your skills anyway within your business, and here's a way you can do it, and this is how we can help you, or this is how this organisation can help you. And I know that the organisation is very keen to have a workforce which is reflected of society. So there's been a lot of interest in the news last night about children with special educational needs. Mm-hmm. We've got problems with prisons being overfull, but eventually people leave prison, so possibly as a way of getting ex-prisoners involved in the project. A number of ways in which the site getting ready for actually building the power station, because we're really at the moment we're talking about getting ready for building the power station, is fully integrated into local society, and the community are on your side in terms of building it. So.
You're right, and that's again an area where we can support. It might not be our day-to-day, but again, if you're a business that wants to understand those organisations, that's what we're there for as a chamber. Just reach out. We can make those intros and help you understand where best you can do some good. We've had quite a busy week this week as a team, but on Tuesday we were out volunteering ourselves. Now, we chose a very small local charity to volunteer with, and that was all about nature. How we're trying to, because we live in such a beautiful place, but actually our heathland has been fragmented. So the big aim for the AOMB locally and the likes of the Wildlife Trust and the Heath and Landscapes Trust and so on, is actually how we reconnect it all to make that corridor for nature again. And I know from Sizewell's perspective with their partnership with Wild East, it's the same concept, how you link all this back together again. But if every business just does a little bit like that, that all helps. If every business, I gave the example when we did the webinar with HMB Hoseley Bay. If every single business on our portal, that's roughly 2,800 businesses, I appreciate not everyone can, but if everyone took a chance on one ex-offender from Hoasley Bay, we would not have a problem of overcrowding in Suffolk prisons. So, and I appreciate not every business can afford to do that. I guarantee some businesses can afford to do that with 2 or 3 people. So the average is there. It's just about doing something. And whether that's then Inspire Suffolk, who work with young people, whether that's ISCRI, who work with people from different backgrounds, particularly in the Ipswich area, with regards to race and religion, it's about creating that opportunity.
Yeah, and that the horticultural industry scheme, who are on our Super Suffolk Supplier series, explained to me that they've seen amazing success in taking ex-offenders, putting them into the horticultural industry, and then less than 2% returning back to prison. Mm-hmm. So they've come out of what is actually a secure area into a frightening environment because there's no support, found a role for themselves, and have then started to develop some stability in their lives, which has meant they haven't reoffended and had to go back inside. So I suppose bringing this to a close, we know that if people got a question, they can go to the Suffolk Chamber supply chain team.
Yes.
They can certainly come to VARTAN Consultancy, where we've got the VARTAN way, where we're helping companies get ready for businesses. But I think if we're going to leave businesses and employers with a message, Ashley, it's what do businesses need to do now to prepare for approaching tier ones? And for that approach to be received favourably, what the companies need to be doing now?
I think it's getting, and it is. I appreciate I'm not running people's businesses, so it's very easy to say, not very easy always to do. But it is get yourself as prepared as possible. Ultimately, you as a business, if there's a package of work coming up that's relevant to you, you're the experts, right? You can do it, hopefully, obviously, and you'll be able to evidence through that procurement process that you can do it. But it's understand your place in the supply chain. That's important. You know, the project will not risk delivery by just using a local supplier. If a package of work is worth £5 million and your turnover is £3 million, you're not going to be considered. You're too much of a risk. So sometimes it's just embracing those local or national, even larger organisations that are going to come in and run these packages and let you pick up as their tier 2, tier 3 supply chain enough to let you grow and develop as a business. But get yourselves ready. Whether it's areas of social value, whether it's areas of compliance and readiness as a business, these are all things that even if you're not needed on site for 2 years, you can be doing now because, as you know, Miles, they're just best practice. If, you know, we were chatting in our break a little while ago about health and safety. If you have a policy and a big sign outside your car park that says everyone must reverse park and you allow people not to reverse park, if Sizewell will come and do an audit and see that, what does that tell them about your business? Now, it's a really silly example, but it is a simple one. And I've been out to a lot of businesses and I've given that feedback of just their impression when someone comes. Inside the doors, they might be pristine, but it's just give yourself that impression, give yourself that best chance. So start engaging with community groups and colleges and charities now. Start looking at your processes and policies, because all of these things will help you win work at Sizewell, but they'll also help you win work at the US Air Force, at ABP, at Scottish Power, RWE, all of the other large-scale energy projects, potentially with Suffolk County Council, with the A12 upgrades that are about to start next year. You never know, we might finally have something happen with the Oral Bridge and Northern Relief Road. There we go, we mentioned it. But whatever happens with these large-scale projects, actually the focus more on being sure you're compliant, safe, on time, on budget, but also that you're delivering more than just what is that package of works is so important.
And tell people about it.
Oh, and tell people about it. We are so good at patting ourselves on the back, I think, in Suffolk. And we do a good job. You know, we joked when we did the Super Suffolk Suppliers. We've got some incredible businesses, and I'm still blown away so often when I rock up to someone's business and you suddenly realise, I did one recently, and almost all the frames for Tesco petrol forecourts, where the actual pumps go, they're made by a company in Suffolk across the whole of the UK. And it blows your mind. You'd never know these types of things. And it's a wonderful story. And I think it's how we sell those stories. So communicating your successes, communicating yourself as a business, marketing yourself. You know, you might do a great job, but when was the last time your website was upgraded? How do you handle yourself on social media? All these things are vitally important and small little pockets of what will help you be noticed.
100%.
And it will make a massive difference.
Contrary to a lot of perception, the media actually like good news. I remember listening to 5 Live when Jane Garvey and David, can't remember his surname, was on the programme, and he was famous for his rather cynical view about good news, and he had to interview somebody in the States from Good News FM. And he said, "Tell me, how do you actually talk about good news all the time?" And he had to admit at the end that, you know, possibly the BBC should not always concentrate on the bad news and the scandal and the terrible things that are happening, but the good news. And if anything, Sizewell C, the perception has to be that this is a good news story for Suffolk.
There's a lot more positives, and I think that's something we are working very hard on now. Now there's some contracts being awarded to local firms and officially being awarded as well. We're about to embark on a big comms piece with a number of suppliers just around celebrating those positive stories, because I think that's important. We did it recently with the direct air capture at Lowestoft with Norfolk Marine, because it's a fantastic story. I mean, actually, it's a nationally significant story because direct air capture is a prototype. That is potentially one of our solutions for climate change. And we've got a local Norfolk firm in charge of constructing it. I mean, that's amazing. So it's how we celebrate those. And I think it's, you know, there always attempts to be a balance in news sometimes where there has to be a counter to some positivity. Well, sometimes actually the positivity just has to outweigh it. And I think there's already, you know, we're hopefully soon going to be able to produce some stats on the amount of millions that have been won by local and regional firms already. But I can tell you it is many tens of millions. I don't want to start going into the hundreds yet, but I'm pretty confident it will be. I'm pretty confident it'll be well in excess of those figures. I just want to be able to quantify it and make sure it's as accurate as possible. But we're already seeing so much success. And I think the more we can celebrate that, it showcases the project meant what it said it was going to do. It showcases we're obviously doing our job, which will be fantastic. But actually it also then starts to showcase how good regional and local businesses actually are at delivering on these large-scale projects.
Well, that's great news. And so, Ashley, thank you very much for coming this morning to do this recording for our podcast. Thank you for all the positive and all the angles that you've given us on it. For those listening, we will be doing subsequent podcasts and we'd be interested to hear the subjects that you would like us to talk about. So keep an eye out for the podcast when it will be published on all the usual channels. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Compliance Experts podcast. We highly value your input and welcome any questions, thoughts or challenges for us to tackle in forthcoming episodes. VARTAN Consultancy pride themselves in helping customers manage risk and subsequently helping them improve their overall company performance. To speak to Miles and his team, visit VARTANconsultancy.com. This podcast is produced and managed by podtalk.co.uk and is the copyright of VARTAN Consultancy. This podcast is created for entertainment purposes only. Views and opinions are that of VARTAN Consultancy and their guests. Information recorded in this episode was deemed correct at the time of recording. However, we advise you to always check with VARTAN Consultancy for up-to-date information and legislation.